What if the dream that you've been holding on to has already finished? And I ask the question, like, is this it? Welcome to the Climb Podcast, where we are diving into taboo topics and redefining the rules for women of color leaders. Get ready as we share the stories and amplify the voices of extraordinary women of color. From navigating workplace challenges to celebrating triumphs, on this podcast, we've got you covered. So buckle up and join us as we embark on today's empowering journey. Welcome to the Climb Podcast. I'm your host, Felicia Smith, and this podcast exists to have those conversations that no one really wants to have about career advancement, specifically for women of color who are trying to navigate these spaces where the rules are rarely explained. The topic for today's episode is When Purpose Evolves, giving yourself permission to outgrow your dreams. Because the truth is, sometimes the most unexpected moments in your career is realizing that the dream that you once thought was the end all and be all for your career that you've worked so hard for no longer fits the person that you are becoming. A lot of times we start out with a goal of something that we want to accomplish in our careers. We invest all the time, we sacrifice for it, and we build even our identity around it. And then we notice something shifts internally inside where the way that we used to feel about this dream no longer. There's like a pull that doesn't feel the same. Still kind of this uncomfortable question inside yourself that you have to ask, like, why am I feeling this way? Why does it not feel as exciting, to accomplish this goal or to be near the end of accomplish this goal? And oftentimes what I'll hear is what if the dream that you've been holding on to has already finished? What if the thing that you thought you were building up to, you're already there, you're at the top, and you're thinking to yourself, now what? And what if the thing that you thought was supposed to be the pinnacle or the end is really just the beginning of your journey? And what you defined as the pinnacle or the climax really was to prepare you for the skills you needed and to see the bigger picture. Now, on the Climb podcast, we break down our conversation into segments. And our first segment is Somebody Should Have Told Me. And this is where we talk about all the things that we wish we knew or the lessons that we learned along the way that we would have wanted somebody else to teach us instead of us having to learn that lesson. So, if you know a little bit about me, I am a lifelong learner. Like, I love learning new things, but I spent a lot of time at the beginning of my career focusing on educations and certifications. So, I have about 3 degrees. I have 3 degrees and numerous certifications. We're going to say 8 for the sake of the number. And it took me several years of growing, climbing, studying all the things. And when I got all these certifications, like I felt like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. And on paper, it all looked good. It was exactly what I was kind of going for. But the ending of it, the climax or the pinnacle to getting all of these certifications and degrees didn't feel the way that I thought it would be. And I asked myself the question, like, is this it? Like, after all of this studying, is this the feeling that I was going for, the thing that I had worked so hard for? And instead of feeling like I've done this big thing, and it was a big thing, don't get me wrong, lots of hard work of not just studying in one career field, but really mastering business operations from various aspects. So it didn't feel like failure because, it was a big deal, but it was a quiet kind of realization that the dream that had motivated me years earlier didn't feel the same way, didn't carry forward. And that's when I really began to understand something that nobody really talks about. And that's how your purpose can evolve midway. Like the thing that you thought was, again, the top of the mountain can be just the tip of the iceberg. And in some ways that can be exciting, but in some ways it's like, well, what's next? What should I be dreaming for, hoping for, aspiring for? And how do I get there quickly? Now, I'm gonna tell you one thing about high achieving women of color is we want to know what's next and we want to know it now. We like to be able to have a plan, to understand where we're going. And so, although it feels like you've achieved something, you want to know right there what's next. And that's going to lead us into our segment two, which is Truth Is. And that's when we talk about the realities of career growth and the things that really are shaping our career journey. One of the things that I've learned over time is that your purpose rarely changes overnight. It usually shows up in small little signals, quiet shifts, quiet thoughts, your energy moving differently. The problems that you're solving, you start to think differently about them. And so they're really, I'm going to highlight about three signs that your purpose may be evolving a little bit. So sign one is that the thing that once excited you now feels complete, right? Something you've worked really hard to achieve, it just no longer has the same pull. And it's not because it's wrong or it's you shouldn't want it, but the work that used to stretch you, that used to challenge you, that used to make you feel like you were still climbing, now it feels like it's at the end because you've almost mastered that, right? Or you have mastered it and it's now time to move on to the next chapter. Sign two is that there are new problems and things that are starting to call your name. Purpose often reveals itself through the problems that we feel drawn to solve. So you start to become more interested in mentoring others, shaping others, building something new, helping people navigate their journey. And I personally can talk about that because I think I'm in that season where that's what my pinnacle looks like is I've achieved a lot of the things I want to in my career, but now it's time to roll back and to lift as I climb, right? So those interests aren't random. There's goodness in them, but I had to recognize that it is a shift and it was a signal that I was evolving my purpose and what I should be looking for. And then sign three really is that your identity begins to expand. Okay, so let's talk about this. You know, for some women, and particularly high achieving women, sometimes the role or title becomes a thing that defines you. And I'm going to tell you, if you are still climbing or you're new in your career, I'm going to caution you against that. But always know that you are more than a title or a role that you have in your career. There's so much, you're so much bigger than that. You may be a mother, you may be a sister, an auntie, all these other roles that are equally important. But as sometimes when people climb, their role really begins to define them. But as you are transitioning or your purpose is evolving, the title that defines you no longer fully captures who you are. So, what used to be, I am the XYZ of this organization, even that can't hold the room for the woman that you are becoming. So, it doesn't mean that you're not capable of doing the work, right? You can still do all the things, but internally, you're now growing beyond the boundaries of that identity. And I'm gonna be honest, although this is a scary thing, because if you've always identified yourself by that role and now it's changing, it is a great problem to have. Because what it means is that you are beginning to expand and take up more space than you have in the past. You're beginning to see yourself in more fullness of not just being one thing or one role, but so much more. And again, that can be really confusing because people may still see you in that one thing or they may still see you in that role, but internally you're beginning to feel the shift. And that's exciting. For me, it's exciting for someone who's thinking like, man, I used to be this thing and now I'm seeing myself fuller and growing into something else. But there's another layer to this conversation that I think is really true for women of color. And that's that most of us are taught, like when we get that key assignment early in our careers, we got to hold on. We got to grab that opportunity and hold on to it because you've worked hard for it. You've proven yourself and you just shouldn't let it go easy because historically we've been taught that these opportunities weren't always going to be given to people who look like us. So when we're in the room, we feel a responsibility to hold on to that position and to really make the most of it. But here's the thing, if you hold it too tight, and if you feel like you got to stay there, then it doesn't allow you to be open to recognize when it's time to move because you've outgrown that phase of your career. So while it's great to feel honored to be in a space, to have moved in that space, and I use honored lightly, but to know that you've worked to be a place and you got there and you got this amazing role, don't hold it too tightly. Always allow yourself to be open for your purpose to evolve. And letting go of that dream sometime can feel like giving up, particularly if it's before the time in which is prescribed. You're supposed to be there for X amount of years, and now 2 years earlier, you're beginning to feel that tug. That is not failure, right? And you growing and evolving doesn't erase all the amazing things that you've done before. All of those things are still valid, and you have to honor the space in which you have accomplished those things. But sometimes a door opening, like that big assignment, was a door opening to a hallway. It wasn't a door opening, you walking in and just staying in that door. Sometimes an assignment, a job, a purpose, or whatever you thought your career could have been might have been just a door opening to a hallway that's going to take you to so much more. But you have to be open to understanding that it's a hallway and not a door, and there's so much more there. But if you're holding too tightly to being the first in that space, to being the woman of color in that space, and you don't want to move because of what it means, then you will miss the next opportunity for you to be so much more. Welcome to The Climb, a space designed just for women of color who desire managerial, leadership, and even C-suite positions. To achieve this level of success in your career, you need a trusted community that will embrace you while helping you to navigate to your highest career goals. Join The Climb for free. We offer the following resources: The Climb Podcast, Standing on Her Shoulders Leadership Development Program, Women of Color Coaching Network, the Boardroom Training Program, and The Climb Newsletter. Go to www.the-climb.org and click the button Become a Member, and we will keep you updated with our simple and fun newsletter and events that we have coming up soon. You don't want to miss it. Go to www.the-climb.org. See you soon. So I'm going to finish off with our segment that's called Another Rung Mended. And we're going to turn some of the things that we're talked about into some practical insights on how we move forward. So for some women, this resonates, right? You're in a place where you're really feeling like you're evolving, your season is changing, and you're trying to figure out, like, what's next? What do I do, right? So first, you have to release the pressure of really knowing, like I said before, if you're A-type and you're always used to knowing what's next, what's next, what's next, I know I'm going to do this, da, da, da. Sometimes purpose reveals itself in movement. So what does that mean? As you begin to move forward, you begin to figure out what's next. Doesn't come from just writing the plan on the front end. Sometimes just the movement, that's how you do it. Not planning. It's all about forward moving. And that could be scary if you've already known a path. Like I started out knowing I wanted to do this, 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 and that. And when that was done, I had to be able to pivot to just let my movement lead me to the next place in my career and not being used to succumbing to the perfect planning. The second thing is you have to pay attention. And we talk about this all the time. I think this is a common theme across all of the podcast episodes is paying attention to your energy, to others' energy. You always pay attention to something. So remember, pay attention. Okay. So pay attention in this case to what energizes you. Ask yourselves the question, what conversation lights me up? What problems do I care deeply about? What work feels meaningful to me right now? That's the one thing. I am a millennial, but the one thing that I admire about the generations that came behind me is they focused so much earlier on what was meaningful to them in a way where I feel like a lot of us were more focused on we got to get a good job, to make money, in order to care for ourselves, and sometimes still the generation that came before us. And so thinking about meaningful work wasn't at the forefront of what we were thinking about. It was like on the back end. And as we've gotten older, we've gotten the opportunity to really do that. So I admire that about the generations behind us, that they are really looking at what feels meaningful to them. And that's something that's going to be a little bit newer to us. But the looking at what's meaningful, looking at your energy really points you to the answer of where your next season is. And the third thing is to recognize that you may have outgrown where you are. I'm going to leave space for that because that's a hard reality. That sometimes clarity doesn't come from discovering something new. It's really just acknowledging that something old no longer fits. I'm going to say that again. That clarity sometimes comes from acknowledging that something older no longer fits with your narrative, who you are, where you're going. Whether that's a role, it can be an environment, it can be an expectation. But recognizing this, again, isn't failure, it's growth. And then the final piece that I'll leave you for in this segment is you have to give yourself permission to redesign your life to be whatever you want it to be, for your career to be whatever you want it to be, because your career is allowed to evolve. Okay? You are allowed to pursue new impacts, new challenges, new definitions of success. The key word is you are allowed. I'm giving you permission to give yourself permission to do all of those things, to explore, right? Because when we don't allow ourselves a chance to explore, then we can't see when we have evolved. So that's our four things that I want you to really take with you and really think about as you move forward in this season or this new season, if you're kind of feeling that deeply and personally. But before I close the episode today, I really want to leave you with something to think about. You know, many of us are carrying dreams that our former selves or the earlier version of ourselves that we thought would motivate us for forever and give us fulfillment. And that dream pushed us to work hard and it helped us to become who we are, which is our amazing women of color who are doing awesome things, or I'm going to say bomb things in the workforce. But growth will ask us a different question than the questions we asked to climb the ladder. You know, a growth season will challenge you to ask the question, does this fit the woman that I'm becoming? Does this fit the woman that I'm becoming? Not the woman that I used to be, not the woman that I am now. Does this fit the woman that I'm becoming? So as you are growing and evolving in your purpose, I want you to ask yourself that question. Does this fit the woman that I'm becoming? And I think that is an amazing place to close this episode. You know, sometimes, you know, even as I think back to all of the degrees and certifications that I worked to get, and even after I got them, I kind of felt like I no longer needed them. And the reason why is that even as I was striving towards those things, I was also allowing myself to grow and expand and to feel comfortable with who I am in a way that I no longer needed these certifications to solidify who I was the way I thought I needed them to solidify me in the space. I learned that my work and my relationships and my trusting myself was really what I needed. And so that's why when I got the certifications, they didn't feel as exciting as I thought it would, because midway through those certifications, I really gave myself the permission to evolve. Because again, evolving is not quitting, it's growing. That's the episode, guys. That's the pod. If this episode resonates with you, I'm asking you to share it with another woman of color who may be navigating a season of change. But I want you to remember, we are not just climbing ladders, we are building ladders. So until next time, keep striving, keep climbing, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning into the Climb Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on wherever you listen to podcasts. For updates and behind-the-scenes content,
Make sure you're following us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Join the Climb. Until next time, keep climbing and keep thriving, sis. See you next episode.